The icy wind howled through the crowded streets of Boston as Emily, a frail homeless girl of about 20, trudged along the sidewalk. Her tattered coat was no match for the biting cold, and her thin scarf offered little protection as tears rolled down her cheeks. Life on the streets was merciless. Each day felt like a battle for survival, and Emily had long abandoned any expectation of kindness or warmth from the strangers who hurried past her. Her life had crumbled 5 years ago when a devastating house fire took everything from her. Her parents, her younger brother, and the only home she had ever known. Left with nothing but haunting memories, Emily had wandered aimlessly ever since, sleeping in shelters when they were available and scavenging for food wherever she could find it. On this particularly frigid afternoon, the gnawing hunger in her stomach and the crushing despair in her heart felt heavier than ever. As she passed through the wealthier district of the city, Emily's attention was drawn to an imposing mansion with brightly lit windows. Inside, a woman, clearly in her 70s, stood by the window, gazing out into the cold world beyond. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met. Emily was startled to find no judgment in the woman's gaze. Instead, there was a profound sadness, an indescribable loneliness that seemed to pierce through the glass and into Emily's heart. Quickly, Emily looked away and continued walking, but the woman's gaze lingered in her mind. It was the first time in years that she had seen such a look in someone's eyes, a look that seemed to mirror her own sorrow. Despite the woman's evident wealth and comfort, she too appeared burdened by a deep loneliness. The next morning, as Emily sat huddled on a park bench near the mansion, she was startled by the sound of a car pulling up in front of her. The door opened, and the same woman from the window stepped out. Her name was Margaret, and her soft yet commanding voice carried an unexpected proposition. "Come with me," Margaret said. "I need your help, and perhaps you need mine." At first, Emily hesitated. Trust was no longer something she gave freely, and Margaret's offer seemed too good to be true. The elderly woman explained that she was nearing the end of her life and wanted someone to keep her company during her final days. In return, Emily would have a warm place to stay, food to eat, and a chance to rebuild her life. Reluctantly, Emily agreed. She couldn't remember the last time someone had treated her kindly, and the promise of a warm bed was irresistible. As they returned to the mansion, Margaret shared a bit about her life. She had once been a vibrant woman, the heart of a large family, but tragedy struck when her son Charles died in a mysterious accident, leaving her to live in solitude. Over time, Margaret withdrew from the world, relying solely on Victor, her longtime lawyer, to handle her financial affairs. On her first night in the mansion, Emily was overwhelmed. The warmth of the house, the softness of the bed, and the aroma of freshly prepared meals were luxuries she had almost forgotten existed. Margaret treated her like an honored guest, and for the first time in years, Emily felt a glimmer of hope. However, it didn't take long for Emily to realize that not everything in the mansion was as perfect as it seemed. Victor, who often visited to discuss business matters with Margaret, had a cold and calculating demeanor. His watchful eyes followed Emily's every move, making her feel uneasy. As time went on, Emily and Margaret grew closer. The older woman shared stories of her youth, her marriage, and the pain of losing her son. In return, Emily opened up about the tragedy that had rendered her homeless. Through their shared vulnerability, they began to feel like family. However, Margaret's health began to deteriorate, and with it came confessions that shocked Emily. Margaret admitted that she had always suspected Charles's death was no accident. Documents she had come across suggested that Victor, Charles's advisor, might have manipulated him into disastrous business decisions. These suspicions, coupled with growing unease about Victor's control over her finances, led Margaret to make a decision. She would investigate, and Emily would help her. When Emily and Margaret began their investigation, both felt apprehensive about what they might uncover. Margaret had spent decades living with her doubts, but had never mustered the courage to face the truth. Emily, though young and inexperienced, possessed a bold determination to bring the truth to light. They both realized that their search wasn't just about seeking justice for Margaret and Charles, but also about freeing themselves from the haunting shadows of their pasts. In the early days of their search, They started by going through old documents Margaret had kept in a small, forgotten room in the mansion. There they found a letter written by Charles just days before his death. In the letter, Charles spoke of feeling cornered and being forced into decisions he did not want to make. He also mentioned Victor, describing him in conflicting terms, both as someone he relied on and someone he feared. The letter gave Emily a glimpse into the pain and helplessness Charles had endured. It pushed her and Margaret to delve deeper into the investigation. Emily suggested that they needed additional help, and Margaret agreed to contact George, an old family friend. George had been a trusted financial expert and someone Charles had deeply respected. Upon hearing their story, George immediately offered his assistance. "We'll need indisputable evidence," George said. "Victor is clever and calculated. Without concrete proof, he'll evade all responsibility." They began reviewing the financial transactions Victor had conducted for Margaret over the past 2 decades. George quickly discovered several irregularities. Large sums of money had been transferred to offshore accounts with unclear purposes. Additionally, financial documents related to Charles's company showed signs of forgery. Emily and Margaret, though excited as the pieces of the puzzle started to come together, couldn't help but feel apprehensive about what they might uncover. They both knew Victor was a dangerous man, willing to do anything to protect his secrets. While George continued his investigation, Emily tried to maintain an air of normalcy in the house to avoid arousing Victor's suspicion. But Victor was not easily fooled. One day, he arrived at the mansion unannounced, demanding to meet with Margaret. Emily was present in the room as Victor began probing Margaret about the documents she had recently reviewed. His piercing gaze seemed to strip away their every intention. "Mrs. Margaret," Victor said coldly, "I've heard that you've had George Miller reviewing your accounts. Do you no longer trust me?" Margaret, though frail, stood her ground. "Victor, I believe I have the right to know what's happening with my own assets. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about." Victor smiled, but Emily could clearly see the worry in his eyes. As he left, Margaret sighed and turned to Emily. "We need to act faster. I don't think he's going to sit idly by." The tension in the house escalated when George uncovered a crucial document, a contract bearing Charles's signature, which showed signs of forgery. This contract was tied to the sale of a significant portion of Charles's assets shortly before his death. George believed Victor had used this contract to corner Charles into an inescapable situation, ultimately leading to his tragic demise. While searching for more information, Emily discovered another letter that Charles had written to Margaret but had never reached her. In the letter, Charles expressed his concerns about Victor, calling him a wolf in sheep's clothing. The letter broke Margaret's heart. She realized that Charles had tried to warn her, but she had failed to notice the signs. "This is my fault," Margaret said through tears. "If I had listened to Charles sooner, perhaps things would have been different." Emily took Margaret's hand, her voice firm. "No, this isn't your fault. This is Victor's doing, and we're going to make him pay." When all the evidence was gathered, George contacted a trusted attorney to prepare the case for the authorities. However, they all knew confronting Victor would not be easy. He was a shrewd manipulator who would stop at nothing to protect himself. Margaret, despite her declining health, decided she would confront Victor directly. In a final meeting, she looked him in the eye, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "Victor, I trusted you for 20 years, and you betrayed me. Charles died because of your greed. Now it's time for you to face the consequences." Victor, seeing no escape, was arrested at the mansion. As the police handcuffed him, his eyes burned with fury. "This isn't over, Margaret," he said. But Margaret met his words with a calm, resolute gaze. At last, the mansion, once filled with secrets and sorrow, became a place of peace and relief. With Victor gone, and the truth revealed, Margaret's remaining days were filled with tranquility and reflection. She often sat in the garden with Emily, sharing quiet moments of gratitude. "Emily," Margaret said one afternoon, her voice weak but warm, "you've given me more than I ever thought possible. I don't have much time left, but because of you, I feel like I've truly lived these past few months." Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep a few weeks later. Though heartbroken, Emily was determined to honor Margaret's memory. She was shocked to discover that Margaret had left everything to her in her will: the mansion, her remaining assets, and a heartfelt letter. In the letter, Margaret wrote, "Emily, you came into my life when I thought I had nothing left to give. But in you, I found a reason to fight, to uncover the truth, and to believe in second chances. Use what I've left you to create a life filled with purpose and kindness. And never forget, you are capable of extraordinary things." With Margaret's words echoing in her heart, Emily began a new chapter. She renovated part of the mansion into a shelter for homeless women, offering them the same chance Margaret had given her. When the first group of women moved in, Emily stood in the grand foyer, looking at a portrait of Margaret and Charles. Tears streamed down her face, but this time, they were tears of hope. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." This story is a testament to the power of kindness and redemption. Margaret's decision to open her home to Emily not only transformed Emily's life, but also brought Margaret the peace she had long sought. It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest moments, connection and compassion can bring light. If this story touched your heart, imagine how many more lives we can change together. Subscribe to Life Stories 365 today. We post inspiring videos every week, sharing tales of hope, courage, and transformation from around the world. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Together, we can build a community that celebrates the resilience of the human spirit. So, what are you waiting for? Click subscribe now and be part of something truly meaningful.